Okay, a good evening. Um, a fair bit to talk about with what's going on in the sport right now. Obviously, the big cricket news is that Jimmy Anderson will miss the first Ashes test. I think this is Jimmy Anderson's last overseas tour, and I think next summer he will retire. I can't see Jimmy Anderson going another Ashes sequence, if I'm honest. Um, no further news with Major League Baseball finding a break in the deadlock with the lockout. This could be a significant shutdown for the league at this point. Um, and we could see a whole season possibly lost. So that's something to bear in mind. And of course, the only proposal that has been put on the table that is new is expanding the playoffs. So there's that. Obviously, we've had the FA Cup second round. We've only got one replay to be played next week between Ipswich and Barrow. Obviously, the full draw is out, and there are a couple of ties that look pretty tasty. I think the Crystal Palace Millwall game is possibly one of the tastiest of the third round. West Ham Leeds is another one, and Manchester United Aston Villa. Could this be the moment that um, either side has a turn in fortunes? Even though Villa have been very successful under Gerrard, with the bounce that he's had as manager and the performance he's picking up. Um, could this mean added impetus to Aston Villa? Same for Man United. Could that really turn their season around? Um, and it's obviously Ranić's first season in English football. Um, a lot of emphasis is put on the cup competitions. It is the most historical cup competition in world football. So winning it comes with a big sense of accomplishment. It's something that every player and manager wants to win and do well in. Let's have a look at some of the other headlines. All right, let's have a look at the current Major League Baseball lockout. Uh, let's have a look. Let's have a look. Um, uh, okay, so at the moment they're not allowing any free agent signings, no trades, and a potentially fewer regular season games in 2022. There'll be no games in 2022. Um, Rob Manfred, the Major League Baseball commissioner, has written an open letter to baseball fans in announcing and advancing justifications for the owner lockout that presently afflicts baseball. The Major League Baseball commissioner Rob Manfred indulged in two reliable blights upon modernity: the open letter and rank dishonesty, costume as public relations messaging. The Royal we speak of Manfred's recent missive title, A Letter to Baseball Fans, which attempts to blame the players and their union for the sport's first work stoppage in more than 25 years. Despite the league's best efforts to make a deal with the Players Association, we are unable to extend our 26-year-long history of labour peace and come to an agreement with the MLBPA before the CBA expired. Therefore, we have been forced to commence a lockout of Major League players effective at 1 minute past midnight on December the 2nd. So 5 days, 6 days now, five days this lockout's been going on. So, yeah, the owners. This is reporting from the Athletic. The owners would not agree to make a counter on reserve system and luxury tax issues unless the Major League Baseball Players Association agreed in advance to drop a number of key demands, including the time it takes players to get to free agency and revenue sharing between owners. A person with knowledge of the union's position said such a precondition was something union leadership could not recall seeing before in bargaining. The person said. In the context of the CBA that will cover the 2022 to 2026 seasons, free agency and salary arbitration timelines are central matters, and refusing to discuss them undermines the current entire exercise. This isn't to say owners must agree to the only proposal put forward by the union, but to say free agency and revenue sharing are off limits, more on revenue sharing below. It's not a serious tactic. Yeah, so that's a PR nightmare for the league. Evening thoughts on Bellingham's £32,000 fine. Uh, I think under current rules that FAs, the various domestic FAs have, when you do question the integrity of a match official, that is classed as bringing the game into disrepute. The fact that the match official involved in the refereeing of that game had been suspended for 6 months, and to do with match fixing, I think there's got to come a point where we've got to be careful when criticising officials in a lot of sports, but at the same time, I think I think under the current rules, a fine is expected. I think it's excessive. I think it's excessive. Yes, Ryan Lowe left Plymouth Argyle yesterday and has joined with Preston North End today. So when I was doing my third round preview, that hasn't been confirmed. How that will affect Plymouth Argyle going forward, considering they've been playing quite well this season, we shall wait and see. But again, another managerial turnaround. There's a lot of managerial instability at this point. I think we're on course to beat the previous record for managerial changes in the season in English football. The average, I mean, who would want to be a football manager? Plain and simple, who would actually want to get into football management? I know over this weekend in the matches that I watched in the FA Cup, there were a lot of young managers and coaches involved. Um, but quite frankly, who would want to manage in the higher divisions like the Championship and the Premier League? Because the average lifespan of a manager is 18 months and is shrinking. And I think I feel sorry for Plymouth Argyle because now they've got to search for a replacement. And Preston North End, yeah, have sacked one manager this season. They're 18th in the Championship. I think that's it is what it is. I think the likelihood is Preston stay in the Championship and Plymouth Argyle are fighting for promotion, so they could be playing each other next season. Or if Preston do get relegated and Plymouth don't get promoted, it isn't much of an upgrade. If we're being honest, um, it's not much upgrade for Ryan Lowe, but Preston obviously have a bigger budget to play with. It's further up the league ladder, so he's challenging himself at a higher level, which any manager should be wanting to do. But I think we've got to look at the managerial turnover for clubs and in football because there's been talk in other sports. And I'm going to say this as a wider topic: is uh, you know should a club be forced to keep the same manager for the entire season? Um, like should there be changes to the transfer window and that's the squad you've got for the season? Any injuries or suspensions, promote youth players or fringe players and reserves. I think the same argument you had if you've got a manager who signed a contract, I think he should be allowed to fulfill that contract. And then if the contract's up for renewal and he hasn't met expectations, then you change manager. But unfortunately, the way football's gone, it is this win now mentality. Owners are impatient. That's because there's too much money in the game and it's not evenly distributed. Yeah, I'm surprised he decided to leave Plymouth Argyle, considering the form they're doing and going to Preston with the situation that Preston are in. But Preston had activated a clause in his contract where they could talk to him, and he decided to enter those negotiations. I believe the whole process was fully transparent. I think Argyle have slightly made a bit of a blunder there with the contract they signed with Ryan Lowe, whereby the activation clause basically means he can step aside. So I think Plymouth have slightly shot themselves in the foot by the way their contract was worded. Um, on a manager standpoint, I think he should be entitled to want to seek employment opportunities higher up the football ladder and test himself at a higher level. I think he might have done better with staying with Argyle and helping them get promotion would have been a better look on his credentials. But at the same time, Preston aren't in the worst situation. They're not in a great situation, but it's not as bad as it could be. But again, that's another managerial change mid-season, and We've seen a lot of managerial changes this season, not just in English football, but across the board. Um, there's got to come a point where that becomes unsustainable. Now, because he resigned and stood down and wasn't sacked, he walked away from his contract, which means Plymouth Argyle do not have to pay him any compensation. I think Preston have to pay the compensation for his contract because they activated the clause to have negotiations with him. And Plymouth, when obviously with that clause, can't obviously block him from discussing terms with another club. Um, the fact that they went into this FA Cup second round with that backdrop, plus their form has tapered off a little bit since the first round, is making me wonder how long these talks with Preston activating the clause in his contract have actually been going on. Has that actually affected the dressing room? Um, that's something to consider. But quite honestly, these constant managerial sackings and resignations and approaches, it's not financially, I don't know how football can continue to do this. And it doesn't matter what league you're in or what league system in what country. There's got to become a point where it does become unsustainable. When you've got bigger clubs, more global clubs like Barcelona in serious financial difficulty, and we can say COVID exacerbated it, which it did. It sped up the financial difficulty that some of these clubs are in. It says to the wider footballing fan base that the sport is being run unsustainably on the financial side of things. Um, I'm not talking sustainability on the eco mentalist side of things, as I would call it. On the financial side of stability, it is not sustainable. You know, there I have massive concerns as a fan of sport that certain sports have not been run sustainably with financial stability and financial prudence. They've been run recklessly for a very, very long time. And we're seeing that with Major League Baseball. Now, I know no one in the chat right now um, is a Major League Baseball fan, but we've seen it. Um, we've seen it in so many other sports, um, and financial sustainability is a key concern that I think a, a lot of fans are worried about. I mean, look at Everton. They've spent £500 million in the last 5-6 years, and they're just above the relegation zone in the Premier League. I was watching NBC Sports YouTube channel because they had snippets on what's going on. Their director of football's just been sacked. Rafa Benitez, how long is Rafa Benitez going to be staying at Everton? They've won no games in 10. They've got 2 draws, 8 defeats. They are in real trouble. They are nosediving at the moment. The gap at the top and the bottom is getting bigger and bigger, which is concerning. Yes, it is. Um, that is something that I can definitely agree with. The wealth distribution, the TV deal. Looking at the FA Cup this weekend, the league sides who were at home had more empty seats than the non-league clubs. The non-league clubs put on really great, show. I mean, apart from the Oval Town, that was like a half-empty stadium, but Boreham Wood was a sold-out stadium, which was really good to see. But I've noticed a lot of empty seats. Now we could say, yeah, the pandemic's had an impact. Fans that would have gone a couple of years ago haven't. Some people have been hit in the pocket financially with the pandemic by either losing their job or having reduced hours or reduced income. And so, yes, it was very noticeable, a lot of the empty seats at games. With clubs like West Ham getting a rich check and the 49ers owners can buy 100% of Leeds. Yes, the San Francisco 49ers ownership have a stake in Leeds. Now, they have the option to have a 100% takeover by January 2024. there is an option within their agreement as investors. However, someone else could come in and buy a stake of the club to prevent that 100% takeover. As things currently stand with the way the club is, whether who owns the money and stakes in the club. Um, if I won the lottery tomorrow, I would happily prevent a full secondary, another American takeover. I would happily buy a stake in Leeds United, quite frankly. Yeah, West Ham, yeah, Sullivan and Gold look like to sell up and check an overseas investment. Um, there hasn't been a lot of news on that West Ham takeover, and the Leeds one, barely any articles. One or two articles about the 49ers ownership increasing their stake season upon season. Now, I think there is a clause which they can activate, where they can become sole shareholders by January 2024. That isn't necessarily going to happen. They could decide to defer on that and split the ownership 50-50, 70-30, you name it. But they've been slowly buying stakes in the club and increasing their share of the ownership for some time. It will be interesting to see what happens in the end. Obviously, we've had the Newcastle takeover this season. That should have happened like 4 years ago, quite frankly. So, yes, I mean, we'll see what happens with Leeds United and if it eventually becomes a full 100% takeover. I believe once you own 75% of the club, you can do a compulsory share purchase. I don't know if the 49ers are trustworthy owners, but a lot of worried pundits and fans, including people like Simon Jordan, who talked about earlier. I haven't listened to TalkSport for quite some time. I might give it a listen tonight while I'm lying in bed, but I I'm well, Fenway Sports own Liverpool, and they also own the Red Sox in baseball, and they've just bought the Pittsburgh Penguins. The 49ers ownership, it will be interesting. I'll be interested to see what Leeds fans have to say, because they're the ones who are going to be affected. Let's be brutally honest. They're the ones who are going to be impacted by this proposed takeover of a full 100%, takeover. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, the 49ers as an organisation, yeah, there are some question marks over some of the decisions they have made in the last decade or so. And that's to do with their NFL operations, the Colin Kaepernick situation, the Jared Hayne experiment, and we know there was legal issues with Jared Hayne off the field. Colin Kaepernick basically lost his job for his political views. So there are questions to be asked about the ownership of the 49ers, let alone the ownership of Leeds United. And it won't be the first time American money's come into the game. But it will be very, very interesting to see what they plan for Leeds United. From what I've been reading, they plan to, I think, expand the capacity of Ellen Road, I believe. I mean, Leeds now own the stadium again after being forced to sell and lease it back to themselves with the financial issues they had in 2003. So Leeds are in a strong position where they own their real estate, which is important. The 49ers ownership group have stated that if they do decide to go with a 100% takeover, there is no plan to move that away from Ellen Road. They plan to invest in the infrastructure at the stadium. So that's a positive. I don't know enough about the 49ers ownership group to really pass comment. I'm going to have to look into that. But there's been very few articles in the media. Now, I'll happily listen to TalkSport this evening and see what what's going on this evening. I might even listen to LBC as well, just to get a viewpoint if it does come up on some of these talk radio channels that are on digital radio. Um, so I'll be interested to see what Leeds fans themselves have to say or feel about the proposal of a majority takeover. Because once the 49ers ownership group gets 75%, then the majority owners, they have more sway on the board. I believe they're at 40 or 50% at the moment. But it's not the only time American money. It's not the first time American money and percentage takeovers have taken place in the game. So we will see how it plays out. But even so, it's still 3 years away. So, just over 2 years away before we get to this stage. Should we get to this stage? Should they wish to take it that far? You know, we will see what happens. Does that mean that there's going to be an MLS franchise in San Francisco, for example, if they are interested in the European game? Because it's not just the English game. I'm calling it the European game because their obsession with the European leagues is known. Does that mean that the 49ers ownership might decide to have an MLS franchise? Because that could be interesting. We don't know what their full intentions are, and that is worrying. And I think with all the pressure that's been put on the Premier League to adopt the 47-point proposal of an independent regulatory body and their resistance to that, more American ownership is not necessarily a good thing because you're going to see further resistance. Now, American fans of European football are very much like us, as in they're not happy with the European Super League idea, taking regular season games out of country, and bringing them over to the US. They don't want that. They want the MLS to thrive as a domestic league. They want to invest in watching in our European leagues, be it the Premier League, the Bundesliga, Serie A, and so it's an interesting one. Liverpool, Man City, or Chelsea. At the moment, it's Liverpool, Man City are slightly ahead of Chelsea at the moment. Better Juve, AC Milan, or Inter Milan. Juve, obviously, we've discussed their legal problems. AC Milan and Inter also have problems as well. So I think fan base wise and success wise, Juventus. Thoughts on the Ice Hockey Champions League? I like it. The Champions Hockey League, I like it. Problem is San Fran is jam packed. Where you're going to put a stadium in 49ers play? Yeah, I mean Oakland. I mean the Raiders have left Oakland. Have a stadium in Oakland. Refurb the Coliseum. To be brutally honest, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, we've had the San Jose earthquakes in the MLS, so they've tried the MLS in the central coast of California before. They have tried in the central region of California before, and I've done a history on the MLS, and we can discuss that. Yeah, San Francisco as a city is actually a very small geographical area with a large, just it's a very intense urban area with quite a large population in a very small space. Same with Seattle, ironically. Seattle and San Francisco, with the way the coastline and the bays are shaped, both cities are a high population density in very small areas. So it is like all on top of each other. Um, Again, it's an interesting one. I mean, obviously, you've got LA Galaxy and Los Angeles FC in California. You've got Portland and Seattle as well in the MLS. You've got Vancouver in the MLS. It would be interesting to have a team in San Francisco or called San Francisco something. And with the Oakland Raiders moving to Vegas, there is a vacant stadium that could use a massive refurb that has the right size dimensions of pitch. And on the West Coast, football is very popular. No, they were not a good team. Vancouver and Seattle both no longer have NBA franchises, for reasons they weren't very good. Um, talking removing like parachute payments in the EFL, that's something that needs to be looked at. Um, Again, it's just talks, it's just proposals, and the EFL comes under a lot of criticism for a lot of its handling of situations. There's a lot of fan groups, and support groups that aren't happy with how the EFL has dealt with a lot of issues. Um, the Berry situation really highlighted, failings within the EFL system. And parachute payments, they are technically rewarding failure. Failure should not be rewarded, and that's my personal opinion. Failure should not be rewarded. But the way the TV money works, you need the parachute payments in order to sustain yourself for the first 2 seasons in the league below. We already have the Golden State Warriors in NBA. That's already taken. Uh, I, we'll see what happens with the Leeds proposed takeover. Um, and we'll just have to let this story run its course because there's no guarantee that it will happen definitely in 2024. That's the earliest date they can complete the 100% takeover. Someone else can come in and buy a stake of the club, or come in with an offer, and that then changes the dynamic of the situation. That does change the dynamic of the situation because there's only two owners, there's only two major shareholders in Leeds United. This is where Manchester United with the Glazers, they had it on the stock market at one point. Newcastle United was on the stock market at one point. They had shares. You could buy shares in a Premier League club. They were listed on the stock exchange. So we shall see what happens. Uh, yeah, obviously, I would say Italy slightly edges Spain in international success. Um, and more clubs have won the domestic competition and domestic cup competitions and league. Italy's got a more competitive league historically than Spain. Far more historically competitive league structure. More teams have won Serie A. More teams have been in the top flight in Italy. More teams have been relegated from the top flight in Italy. It's a very competitive league. Spain is competitive, but not as competitive. So that's my opinion on that one. Italy edges Spain historically, and they've won more international tournaments as well. So just putting it out there. First nation to win back-to-back World Cups. So putting it out there. First European nation to, I think 4 World Cups. So, I would say right now, no, they're not even. I would say Italy is possibly just ahead. I think Spanish football is in crisis at the moment. Um, More crisis than Italian football. Uh, three of the biggest clubs in Spain have got massive money problems. Who I think wins next year's Women's Euros? That is an open-ended question. Um, oh fuck. That's very interesting. I would say England have a very very good shot. England have a very very good chance. Germany, you should never discount Germany either. They've got a very strong domestic women's league. Um, so that one's very open ended. And delaying it by lots of new players have come into squads and got game time. So that one is the Scandinavian countries always very strong as well. Oh, got me fucking fagging that. Oh god. So you can never discount the Scandinavian countries when it comes to women's football. Sweden and Norway, and they always put out strong sides historically. So it's a very open competition. I think harder to predict than the World Cup in the women's game. Um, I think the women's Euros next year, the World Cup for the men's game next year is very open. I think historically Serie A in actually no, I think they're about even. Just because Bayern Munich's had this dominance for a very long time in Germany, Actually, very historically competitive league. Very historically competitive league. Um, Serie A as well. I think they're about even historically. Right now, I think they're about even. They're about even. Um, the German system, I think, is producing the better youth talent, and domestically, a high percentage of players are German in the German league. But the Italian league also has very high percentage of players being Italian based, so that's very, very, very even. Um, and historically as well. Historically, very even. And right now, for the percentage of players who can represent Germany or Italy in those leagues, quite even. I think Italy just edges it on European success. But in Germany, more German clubs have had European success. So, um, again, pretty even, pretty even in my opinion. Very hard to tell. I would have to do a history on both the Bundesliga and Serie A and look at the winners. You know what clubs have won what and how many different league winners for club there have been since 90. I'm going to say call it the modern era. So let's go 1992 when I started watching football, and we can work out which league is more competitive by looking at league titles, which clubs have won what, which clubs have won silverware and trophies going where. I think the best way to look at it would be league title winners and how many different clubs have won the league title. I mean, I could look further back in history because Hellas Verona and Cagliari have both won Serie A. Roma's won Serie A. Lazio have won Serie A. So I think was it Sampdoria won Serie A title as well. So that there are there's definitely history there to look at. So that's a very interesting one. I think the Premier League is more competitive. Um, so again, um, that in itself is interesting. You know, we've had 7 different clubs winning the Premier League era, um, and 6 of them are still in the Premier League or currently in the Premier League, and one's in the Championship. So Serie A again. We can look at again from 1992, the Champions League era, and we can compare the top 5 leagues and look where the titles have gone since 1992. Absolutely, and then you can work out which is actually the best league. In my opinion, you know, divide 30 by 7, and that's roughly every I think 3.5 years. Like a different club has won every 3.5 years or something. Serie A, I think about the similar number of clubs have actually won the top flight in Italy in since '92 as well. So that's about even. The fact that you know 2 of the Premier League winners have only won the single title, and others have won multiple titles, but they're more evenly spread between multiple clubs. Whereas in Italy, there's a lengthy period of dominance by Inter and Juventus in recent seasons. In the last 15 years, only 2 clubs have won Serie A. That's Inter and Juventus. So there's your difference. So right now, the Premier League is more competitive, but we'll have to look from 1992 how many different clubs have won, regardless of dominance. How many different clubs have won, and that's where it gets interesting, in my opinion. But that's a very good question. Again, what I will do is the top 5 leagues in Europe. We will look at how many different clubs since '92 have won the league title. If it's only once or multiple times, it doesn't matter how many different clubs have lifted the league title since 1992. That is a better way of, I think, of looking at which league is the most competitive. And you'll be surprised. Spain does not come as highly as you think. I can name 5 clubs in Spain off the top of my head since '92. 5. Now, I could be wrong. There could be more in there, but I can name 5. Real Madrid, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, Valencia, and Deportivo La Coruña. I could be wrong. There could be others, La Liga winners in there, but I think it's 5. Italy, I think I can count about 7 or 8. Premier League, 7. The French League, um, I think it's maybe more. I think it'd be 9 clubs. Germany as well, since '92. It's not just the Bayern Munich show. I do think the French league has actually had the most league winners since '92. Marseille, Montpellier. I think Bordeaux won it once. Lyon won it 4 years in a row, which was a record at the time. Lille, PSG, Monaco. That's 7. Was there St Etienne one year or Auxerre? I think I'm going to have a look at that. I think Toulouse have won it one year. Bordeaux have won it. Montpellier, Marseille, Lille, Lyon, Monaco. Yeah, I think it's 8. I think it's 8 or 9. I think it's 8 or 9. I think there's an obscure winner in there somewhere, like not a very big club has won it. But again, I will definitely look at since '92 the different clubs. So the amount of times the club has won it, how many different clubs have lifted the title, and then I will go how many titles that particular club has won. Like Man United have won 13 Premier League titles. There you go. We know that. Blackburn and Leicester have got 1 each. Man City, I think, have 3 or 4 league titles. I think it's 4. Liverpool have won it once. Arsenal have won it several times. Chelsea. So there's 7 clubs that have won the Premier League. I'm definitely going to have to do a video on that. I know Auxerre have won the French league, but have they won it since '92? That is the question. But I'm more than happy to look at Juve, Inter, AC Milan, Roma, Sampdoria, Lazio. That's about right. I knew Sampdoria got a league title, but is it in? But was that before '92? Because I believe that was before '92. But I'm happy to look at since the Champions League era, so 1992, when they rebranded the European Cup. I'm very happy to look at how many different clubs have won, and I'm going to have to work out how I title the video. But it'd be very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. The fact that if the French league has got more title winners, so separate clubs winning the title, that would astound me, considering how uncompetitive it is. I knew it was Auxerre. '96, crikey. Can you name me Auxerre's most famous player? I can. He's also played for Sunderland and Liverpool, and the French national side. That is an interesting one. Can you name me Auxerre's most famous, recognisable player in the modern era? I'll give you 30 seconds. He's also played for Sunderland and Liverpool. Have a think on that. And I'll get back to you. See, this is where it's getting interesting now, because I know Lens have won it, but have they won it before or after '92? Because if it's before, I know Marseille won it before '92, but then had the title stripped because of match fixing. So was one of them retrospectively awarded the title? That's the interesting question. But I'll have to look into the top 5 leagues in Europe, which is the most competitive. That's how I'm going to title the video. I'll do some research tonight and tomorrow, and then later this week, I will come up with a video. How about that? Because that's a good one to look at, because we're always discussing the top 5 leagues in Europe, which is the most competitive league. The French league gets regularly criticised. You know, the German league at the moment with Bayern Munich winning a lot of the time is getting criticised. There's going to be some surprising stuff that comes out. Some surprising stuff that comes out about these leagues and the history of them and why money has ruined the game. And this is where you will see money ruining the game, in my opinion. You know, that's my personal opinion. This is where we're going to see the explosion in the late 90s, early 2000s, and leagues becoming less competitive. See, now you're ruining it. You're doing my research for me. I've got to do the research. I've got to find the little Jibril Cisse. Someone got the question right. Yes, Auxerre's most famous player is Jibril Cisse. I remember when he was breaking through in the late 90s, early 2000s, my French teacher at the time at school was an Auxerre fan and mad Auxerre fan. And I found that bizarre. Um, and just he had this Jibril Cisse poster in the classroom. He had this Jibril Cisse poster in the classroom. Mad for him, absolutely mad for him as a player. Rated him very, very highly. And of course, he went to Liverpool and then on to Sunderland. He had a couple of nasty leg injuries, and obviously that hampered his career. But Jibril Cisse, on his day, one of the best players on the pitch. But you could argue he was a poor man's Thierry Henry and a poor man's Nicolas Anelka. He had less of an impact on the Premier League than Anelka and Henry did in the 90s and early 2000s. He was less effective, partly because of injury. Thierry Henry, out of the three of them, was the best of the three French strikers, in my opinion. Nicolas Anelka, obviously, his attitude, there were question marks over his attitude and his commitment at times and his work ethic. But Jibril Cisse, it was more down to the injuries he sustained, which massively derailed his career. But he burst on the scene at Auxerre, and then Liverpool picked him up. Liverpool had a thing at the time for going to France with Gerard Houllier as manager, signing French players. You had Le Talec and there was a Cinema Pongo from Le Havre and Jibril Cisse, and of course the infamous El Hadj Diouf. So there was a big craze at the time for Arsenal and Italy looking at the French league for players. Auxerre had a World Cup winner on the team before PSG did. There you go. There you go. You know, the French squad in '98 was one of, if not the most diverse squad to ever win a World Cup for the clubs that they were chosen from and the leagues they played in. It wasn't just an entirely French-based squad; they were playing all over Europe. But that, for me, was the most diverse World Cup winning squad I think we have ever seen. Was the France '98 squad? It really was, you know, a oh yeah, Stefan Gouveroche. That is mad. That a player playing for Auxerre in 1998 won the World Cup. That is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, the '98 World Cup, Gavroche. Yeah, I remember him. I remember him. That's how old I am. I'm that old. I am that old that I remember him. But yeah, absolutely. Like the French squad of '98. Look at the clubs they played for. Um, just look at the clubs they played for. Uh, a fair few of them did play in the French league. You you look at the French squad now. How many of them out, apart from PSG-based players, play in the French league? And get back to me. That's the decline of French football right there, domestically at least. The decline of the French domestic league. You can sum it up with your national side. You can sum up the strength of a team's domestic club competition by looking at their national side. Juventus, AC Milan, Inter Milan, Napoli, Roma, Lazio, Sampdoria, and Fiorentina are all big historic best. Yes, they are. That is true. That is a lot of clubs you've named there that are all very, very competitive and have all won the Scudetto. But again, I'm going to be looking at the 1992 till now. Uh, how many different clubs have won the league title? They have to have done it at least once, obviously. And then I'll also look how many times those clubs have actually won the title between 92 and now. But that's definitely a nice little research video I've got going. Um, and it's something to definitely look forward to planning and researching. But please don't ruin it all for me. Please don't give me all the answers. I want to dig myself because I know Marseille had their title stripped, and I know it was retroactively awarded to the runner-up. Um, Torino is still a great club, um, and so um, and the city of Turin is more red than black and white. Um, but yes, I'm more than happy to you know delve into the history a little bit. Basically, I'm looking at my time of watching football as well, which is basically the modern Champions League era. And I think there's going to be some surprises in there with some of the clubs that have won league titles. There will be some surprises in there that may actually surprise a lot of people, um, especially in Germany. I think the German Bundesliga is going to throw up a few curveballs in there and a few surprises. But I want you guys to stop researching for me. My task. But yeah, the Italian league was so competitive in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. The French league was competitive in the 90s and the early to mid 2000s, and it's dropped off. It has dropped off. I would say it's dropped off in around 2005. So Lyon had their lengthy four in a row, and there were commentators at the time going, "The French league's not competitive anymore. Lyon are winning all the time. They're dominating all the time. The league's dying." And then that winning streak stopped, and then other clubs started winning. I think the French league has actually got more league winners since 1992 than any other league in Europe. But we'll see what the numbers tell us. We'll see what the facts tell us. We'll see, what we find out. Really, we will see what we find out. It will be some very fun research, I think, in the next couple of days. Um, while the sports news has gone a little bit quiet, I say a little bit. Now with the FA Cup second round done, next replay, the only replay is next week. I can devote a few more evenings to doing some more club history videos, a bit more time into researching player profiles, and looking at some of the ongoing stories like the Major League Baseball lockout with the open letter by Manfred to the fans, which has gone down quite badly in the media and with fans on social media. So if you're a Major League Baseball fan or you have an interest in Major League Baseball, um, we may see a very reduced schedule next year or no season at all. With the language being used and the positions that the Players Association and the league have taken, there is no room. They're not making much room for compromise. The only proposal put forward to end the deadlock is expand the playoffs. So we will see what happens there. But I'm actually going to call this live stream a live stream. Some really interesting questions. Now I've got a lot of research to do. You've left me with a lot of ideas. I really thank you on that. But I have a very early start in the morning. I've had a very, very long day. So for now, thank you very much for watching. I'll have some more videos for you on the channel very, very soon.